Hi, my name is Victoria and I work for the British Museum's Portable Antiquities Scheme. I'm usually based at Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery, but like so many of us at the moment, I'm currently working from home. So we've got a quick introduction to our team, how we've adapted to working during the pandemic, and a roundup of some standout finds which have been recorded by the Portable Antiquities Scheme in the West Midlands over the last year. So as I say, I'm part of the West Midlands team, which comprises of 4 finds liaison officers, or FLOs as we're known. I thought I'd give you a quick update on the team, as last year we said goodbye to Angie Bolton, who was finds liaison officer for Warwickshire and Worcestershire for some 20 years. And she's now moved on to be curator at the Oxfordshire Archaeology Service. So her replacement now covers Warwickshire and Worcestershire, and is Dr. Sushida Burford. In Shropshire, we've got my colleague Peter Reevell. He's been a finds liaison officer for some 18 years now. And then myself and Teresa Gilmore cover Staffordshire and the West Midlands. We work on a part-time job share basis, sharing the role 2.5 days a week. Just to give you a few stats from the last year, so total finds recorded from March to December 2020. These are the figures from across England and Wales. The blue line is new finds recorded, and the red line is records that have been updated. So they're previously unpublished records that may have been waiting for additional information, such as images or find spot data. So the total number of records recorded across the country in 2020 was 49,045. That's the number of finds within record number of 32,294. That compares to some 53,485 records which were created in 2019. So we do see a reduction here of 40%. We just obviously have to bear in mind current restrictions. We're not able to meet finders face to face for much of the year. We're not able to support volunteers in the same way as we would have done, who help us with finds recording. And one of the finds liaison officers across the country was also seconded into another role. So obviously we face those challenges and others, such as working from home and also homeschooling. But throughout the year, the 42 FLOs carried on working. None of us were furloughed. So as suggested, although there was a reduction in new finds, we could make use of that slight downtime to make other previously unseen records to the public now visible by adding that missing information. So what else have we been up to? Besides our primary responsibility of recording objects, meeting with metal detectorists, we've done this when we've been able to do so. But we've also started a newsletter, so we're trying to think of different ways that we can maintain outreach whilst we're not able to meet with finders. We also produced a series of talks that were recorded for Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery's online content. We also had to adapt to attending treasure inquests virtually. We're often called to act as expert witnesses for these cases, as we provide specialist reports on each treasure item. And we were also involved in the next series of River Hunters. So series 2 was being filmed, and we were able to provide identifications via WhatsApp for these objects as they were coming up from the river. And then that helped guide the programme as to which objects to feature in the show. Something else Portable Antiquities Scheme achieved last year was recording the 1.5 millionth find on the database. And this was actually recorded by my colleague Peter over in Shropshire. It was found by a metal detectorist last summer as COVID restrictions began to be eased. Papal bulla act as a formal seal of office. They're used by popes to authenticate documents produced by the Curia in Rome. This is not a particularly unusual find on our database, as we have 557 currently recorded. This one is one of 59 which relate to Pope Innocent IV. and that represents approximately 10% of all PAS records of papal bulla on the database. This disproportionately large number is thought to be due to the business of Sicily. And that's where Innocent IV sought the support of Henry III to take the kingdom of Sicily by overthrowing the illegitimate son of the Holy Roman Emperor, King Manfred. I should note going forward that I've added the fine number onto the slide. So in this case, it's the Hesh number 6359C4, as you see in brackets. So if you are interested in finding out more information on any of the objects that I feature, you use that number, go to our database at www.finds.org.uk, and you can find out more information about all the objects that I feature. So moving on, this is a terret ring. Unfortunately, we only have a small portion of it, and that's the image that you see on the left-hand side. So terret rings were used widely in Iron Age and Roman Britain to harness pairs of horses for pulling carts and chariots. They were generally produced in sets of 5, with 4 smaller terrets set on the wooden yoke and 1 larger ring through which the reins would have gathered. Image on the top right is from a rich chariot burial in the Ardennes region of France, and you can still see the copper alloy terret rings in place on the wooden yoke. So this fragment was discovered near Solihull. When complete, it would have been similar to the example that I've shown on the bottom right-hand corner, which was from Wiltshire. So we only have a small portion of our terret ring still present, as it consists of a small section of the strap bar and 1 set of the wings. So we can presume that there would have been 2 further sets of wings, as seen on the parallel from Wiltshire. And they would have been present on a D-shaped terret ring, which we can see, which are considered a uniquely British phenomenon. They were present from around the 3rd century BC until the end of the 1st century AD. However, it's estimated that the chronology of these winged terret rings are dated to the 1st century BC. Here we've got a small fragment of a statue. You might be able to make out what it is. It's we've got a left ear with some of the hair above it. So the fragment has been modelled with an accurate looking earlobe at the base and the upper external lobe curving upwards. And the hair modelled looks relatively short hair, and the reverse of the object is concave. The object in total measures 63.5 millimetres in length, so it's a fair size. And there's another statue which has been recorded by the Portable Antiquities Scheme that was discovered from Brompton-on-Swale in Yorkshire. That ear was actually the right ear. I don't think it's any connection. But Ralph Jackson, the Roman curator at the British Museum, commented that the hairstyle was consistent with a 2nd to 4th century date. So it's reasonable to assume that this example is of a similar date. So moving on after the collapse of the Roman Empire, so we begin to see less coinage recorded on our database and more items of personal dress, such as these brooches. So here we've got a small assemblage. It comprises an early Anglo-Saxon gilded saucer brooch, that's seen on the upper right-hand side. And there's also an incomplete saucer brooch, and then also a pin. The pin is circular in section. It was broken into in antiquity, and it's likely to once have been attached to one of these brooches. Saucer brooches such as these are more commonly recovered from southwestern England and are understood to have been used in pairs to fasten at the shoulders on a style of dress known as a peplos. It was a pinafore style dress worn by females from the age of 12. And such finds, mostly attributed to burials of women, are understood to have been used to display status. From the recovery of this pair of fragmented brooches, it's possible that these finds are indicative of a previously unknown Anglo-Saxon burial. So further archaeological investigation is taking place by Archaeology Warwickshire to understand the site. Here we have a fragment of a cruciform brooch. So on the left-hand side, we've just got a small fragment. And cruciform brooches were large and decorative items of jewellery and frequently used to pin together women's garments known from across northwest Europe. Cruciform brooches were especially common in eastern England during the 5th and the 6th centuries. Toby Martin who's written a classification system of these brooches, suggests the cruciform brooches were used to fasten cloaks and outer garments. Smaller brooches would have held the tunic-style dresses at the shoulders. Sadly, we only have this small fragment available here, but we believe it probably looks like something as shown below. So the brooch on the lower middle side there. The terminal is zoomorphic. It has pellets representing the eyes and the triangular form for the snout. Distribution map of cruciform brooches recorded on our database shows that they're most common north and east of a line drawn between Felixstowe and Derby, then northwards along the Pennines. There's also a separate group of cruciform brooches from Kent. So those recorded in the West Midlands, such as this one, are outliers to the main distribution. And it's thought the area where they're mainly recovered is Anglian in culture in England, as opposed to Saxon. Three early medieval Merovingian gold tremisses have been recovered across Worcestershire and Solihull over the summer and late autumn by 3 different unassociated finders. They're extremely rare finds in the West Midlands, so why 3 have suddenly appeared in close proximity or close time to each other, we're not quite sure. This example here is just one that was recovered, and it dates to Justinian I, and it's the first pseudo-imperial issue which is recorded in the region by the Portable Antiquities Scheme. The fact that few coins are discovered in this period is due to the diminishing supply of money after the withdrawal of the Roman forces in the early 5th century AD. And it's thought the country largely reverted to a barter system at this time. So these Merovingian tremisses are the first coins to appear in Britain. The Merovingian francs ruled over a part of France and were imitating Roman coinage with the use of busts with jewelled diadem headwear. And the pseudo-imperial coinage was basically contemporary copies unauthorised by the leader on the coin. And it was under Justinian I that the Byzantine Empire grew to its largest point in history, and the famous Hagia Sophia in Istanbul was built under his direction. So the majority of finds we see recorded on our database come from metal detectorists. This one was actually found in a back garden. So it's a garden find from Coventry. It's an ogham or Ogham stone as they're known, and the majority of ogham stones are large standing stones found in Ireland. Some come from Scotland, Isle of Man, Wales, Cornwall and Devon. And there's a single example recorded from Silchester, which is a Roman site in Hampshire. At the time, most ogham inscriptions were made, 5th century come through to 8th century. The southwest peninsula was occupied by the British Celtic kingdom of Damonia, but there were strong trade and religious ties between Damonia and Ireland, which might explain the presence of a small number of monumental stones with these inscriptions. This one we've shown to Catherine Forsyth. She's based at the University of Glasgow. She's confirmed that the markings are those of an ogham inscription. Unfortunately, at this stage, we don't know what it says. We're just waiting for her to carry out some more research. She suggested that the script is of an early style, most likely 5th to 6th century, but possibly as early as 4th century. And the script is very similar to an Ogham inscribed knife handle from Norfolk. Here we move on to an early medieval brooch. Parallels for this brooch have been recorded in Ireland, therefore it's suggested as an Irish import and dates to around 700 to 800 AD. The brooch is broadly an inverted triangle in plan. It has an expanded zoomorphic projection at the tip. It has oval-shaped eyes, which represent the beast with the triangular snout. And you can see the front face is enamelled in yellow. The reverse of the brooch is undecorated. You might be able to see that there's two incomplete prongs or projections, so presumably to allow it to be fastened to clothing. We haven't found many parallels for this brooch. The nearest one was recorded from Wiltshire, which I've shown in the bottom right-hand corner. It has a similar form, and the snout and the eyes, it has very different decoration. This one is also considered to be Irish. Here we have a possible Aster or a manuscript pointer, so it's used for keeping your place on the page. Aspects of the artefact's style and decoration suggest a 9th to early 10th century date. For instance, the blue glass eyes and also the chevron within a circle, which represents the ears. And these have been found on other zoomorphic terminals and numerous toroidal style strap ends. However, we're uncertain of the precise function of this object. It was found in the same field as two virtually identical silver socketed mounts or terminals. And the first of these terminals retains a silver rivet in its socket, so apparently to secure something inserted into the void or the mouth. The group of perforations on the creature's underside, which you might be able to make out, could suggest that it was fastened to something. Therefore, it could potentially have a parallel with a decorative fitting from the tip of a drinking horn, or also a possibility it was attached to the end of cord or lace as some sort of clothing terminal. Here we move on to an early medieval silver penny of Conewolf, who was a king of Mercia, East Anglia in Kent, so making him ruler of most of England. This was a fairly unusual find for the region. We currently have 102 coins from Conewolf's reign recorded on our database. You might see in the figures there that the largest number have been recorded in Hampshire, so we've got 10 recorded there, but we only have 2 from Warwickshire, so this is only the second that we've recorded from Warwickshire. And Conewolf was a descendant of a sibling of King Pendant, who is suggested for his links to the Staffordshire hoard. Although we don't know where the fittings and the battle gear from the Staffordshire hoard came from or who it belonged to, Pendant was killed in battle in AD 655, so it's suggested that it could relate to him. And Pendant's death marked the end of pagan kingship in England. And as we see, Conewolf here on the reverse of his coin has got the cross in the centre, so signalling his religious orientation. This is a stirrup strap mount, and they were used to protect the strap at the top of an iron stirrup where it threaded through the loop. They date to the 11th century, and this example depicts a possible lion facing left with a forepaw raised and his head leaning backwards facing the top of the mount with his mouth opened. They've been classified by David Williams, who divided them into 3 unequal classes based on the shape and decoration. This one fits into the Class A examples, which are broadly triangular and have a rivet with a hole at their apex, which is missing here, and a pair of rivet holes at their base. Here we have a small coin hoard or purse loss. The earliest of these 4 coins dates to Henry II, who was the first to introduce the short cross type, which refers to the cross on the reverse. One of the more commonly found coins from the medieval period, due to the increase in available silver from mines in Central and Eastern Europe. And these particular examples here, the 4 coins, have been minted in London, Canterbury and Lincoln. The nearest mint operating in Henry II's reign in the West Midlands would have been Northampton, and there was Worcester. Coventry's mint was not active until a lot later in Edward IV's reign. Murray Andrews, a lecturer at Worcester University and coin specialist, suggests a small coin hoard of 7 coins that was deposited around AD 1220 is the equivalent of a week's wages. So these 4 coins may have been a significant amount to someone, although we should be careful to not always call them purse losses, as medieval purses are normally much larger and held more coins than just the 4 that we see here. And it's hoped once lockdown is eased that these are going to be donated to the Herbert Art Gallery Museum in Coventry. Here we have a lead alloy seal. In 12th and 13th centuries, many seals were produced in lead or copper alloy, and they were used to authenticate a document by pressing the seal into wax to form an impression. And they often had simple devices on them, such as stars, fleur-de-lis or religious subjects, plus the owner's names. And this one is translated as the seal of John David. Medieval specialists have suggested that David is the surname and possibly reflects the Christian name David, whose name may be derived from St. David. And there's also a possibility that John may have descended from a Welsh family, since David was a more common surname in Wales in the medieval period. Here we have a harness pendant dating to the 13th, 14th century. They were used to decorate horse harnesses and were largely made from copper alloy with an integral loop, which is missing on this example. Pendants are usually suspended on mounts by passing an iron pin through their loops. You can see this one is decorated with blue enamel, and we believe it also had the lion rampants as seen in the heraldry in the centre, which links it to the de Bohun family, who are known for their many royal and noble marital alliances. They held Caldecott Castle and held 3 earldoms of Hereford, Essex and Northampton. Humphrey de Bohun was the 7th Earl of Hereford, and it was his daughter Mary who married the future King Henry IV. Here we have a parchment pricker, so it's copper alloy, and they were equipped with a metal point, which is missing in this case, and it's thought they were used to prick holes in the margins of parchment sheets, which served as guides for the ruling lines. So this object is comprised of a cylindrical rod with a spherical terminal on the top, and the other end has a blunt terminal with a worn break, so that's presumably where the metal point was once attached. So during lockdown, with people spending more time in their gardens, we've had many more garden finds reported to us. May have seen this one in the press last year, as it was found by a university lecturer whilst weeding his raspberries in Stoke-on-Trent. The picture was taken by the finder, so apologies if it's not very clear. But the coin is a silver half-groat of Edward III, and the coin dates to the pre-treaty period of Edward III's reign. So it means it's likely to have been minted in AD 1352 or 1353. And the treaty refers to the Treaty of Bretonne, which was signed in 1360, and that was the treaty between England and France that ended the first phase of the 100 Years' War. We have around 20 half-groats recorded from Edward III's reign from Staffordshire, but this was the first to be recorded from the city itself on our database. Here we have an ampulla. This one's unusual because of the form. Ampulla were brought back from holy sites and filled with consecrated water or oil. And this one takes the shape of a costrel. It has cross-hatching, is visible, cross-hatching ribs on it, and it also has an 8-petaled flower within a circular border. The costrel-shaped ampullas took their inspiration shape-wise from earthenware and leather costrels, which were travellers' water bottles, and they are available in England and abroad from the mid-13th century AD. Here we have a silver annular hawking verval. So vervals were used to attach to a hawk's leather leash, which was held in the hand, and that enabled the bird to be trained in short distance flights. Vervals were used in falconry to identify the owner of the bird. And the inscription on this one reads Ed Lord Brabazon. And it's possible that several members of the family are possible candidates for the original owner. So there's an Edward Brabazon, who was the second Earl of Meath, who served as an MP in Ireland, and he was a royalist who fought in the English Civil War, who sadly drowned off Holyhead en route to England. He also had a son named Edward, who became the 4th Earl of Meath. So based on the lettering, the style of this object, we think it's 17th century, so possibly linked to one of those family members. And my last find is a post-medieval quarter moeda, and it has a value of 1,000 reis of Peter II of Portugal. What's interesting about this coin is that it appears to have been bent into an S shape, suggesting it may have been used as a love token. And love tokens were made predominantly using coins from Elizabeth I's reign, and they're particularly common in the reign of William III. They're not uncommon finds, and their significance is not completely understood. They can sometimes be inscribed with the name of the person loved, or worn smooth, or defaced. And bending coins as part of an oath is an ancient practice. It did not always involve the coins being defaced. In this case, kind of being bent into an S shape. And it's considered that they may have also just been worn as good luck charms, or carried as good luck charms. And finally, if you're interested in any of the finds and want more information on them, you can go to our website, www.finds.org.uk, and there's my details if you want to get in touch with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria, for taking us through those.